can shout, I'm happy to talk that way. Okay, today I'm going to talk to you about rock avalanches, and I know that, actually, just a question, do we have a no to change? Do I just press the button?
Probably you need.
No. I think I believe in you have the pointer.
Okay,
Don't you want the...
can people hear me? You can hear me, yeah? No,
well,
I don't want to shout.
old men tend to be dead.
Okay, sorry, I apologise. Start again. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about rock avalanche mechanics today. This is obviously going to be a little bit of a foray into geophysics and into geomechanics, so I apologise a little for the language, might not be quite what you're used to. And the kind of fracture mechanics we're talking about is very much the sort of dynamic regime. So it's not really looking at initial cracks so much as microstructure of the material in a sort of more general sense. So, first of all, a little bit about what the context is. We have a lot of what we have. We have some rock avalanches of interest. First one I'm going to tell you about is a recent-ish one that happened in the Philippines. One of the reasons why we care about rock avalanches is that they do kill people. They don't happen that often. The very large ones, they tend to happen maybe once every 5 years is probably the average, although it's quite a stochastic thing, so sometimes you won't get one for a decade. But in general, about every 5 years worldwide, there'll be a very large rock avalanche. In the case of the Guinsaugan rock avalanche in the Philippines, it killed over 1,000 people, 1,500 people or so. It had a size of about 20 million cubic meters, and it ran out about 1.3 kilometers. The average velocity was about 40 meters per second. Now, that's quite low, in fact, for the kind of rock avalanches we're talking about. It's at the lower end of things. General averages can be 70, 80 meters per second, so they're very, very fast, and obviously there's not a lot you can do about it. Once one started, there is no getting out of the way in general. This is an aftermath, a bunch of photographs showing the failure, looking from the headscarp on the right-hand side. You're looking down towards the final emplacement area. What you see here is actually quite a dry headscarp, and that's one of the things that's confusing about these kind of geophysical flows, is that actually understanding what's going on within the rock avalanche is quite difficult, because you're inferring for example, the moisture state within that material. And as a result, there's been a lot of argument running over about 150 years as to how these rock avalanches actually behave. For example, there was a lot of rain that occurred prior to this rock avalanche, but the rain didn't necessarily trigger the avalanche. There was a small earthquake that occurred in the days beforehand, and what actually happened is there was a probable slight shift. People who were observing a spring at the base that was usually there at the base of the rock avalanche, the spring disappeared in the days preceding the rock avalanche, so that something changed in the scarp area, and then gradually it's quite probable that allowed pore pressures to build up behind the back of basically water pressure to build up behind the back of the headscarp, which allowed it to finally trigger fairly sort of spontaneously. So it sort of happened during sort of rainstorm, but then once it started moving, it wasn't as if it was moving as a saturated material, because it's basically rock. So once you've got rock moving, it has to break, and as it breaks, it dilates, and that would have to suck in water, and there isn't the time to do that. So this is effectively a dry flow, or a dry process, until it hits, as you can see, the bottom part of that section where it's very wet. That was paddy fields, and that's probably where you've got some sort of undrained loading, as we call it in soil mechanics, of the ground, which allowed things to continue in a very sort of flat way. You can see it's very wet with that soldier helping out there. Now, this was taken about 18 months after the original rock avalanche. You can see this is the headscarp looking to the top right, and a kind of a punctuated bunch of boulders, but with a very kind of fragmented matrix. And that's, again, one of the key things about rock avalanches. They actually start off as intact solid blocks of rock, and they end up as totally pulverized, albeit with the odd rock, larger boulders sort of floating within the matrix. So we are completely changing the material from the beginning to the end. And if we put those observations together over a period of time with a bunch of different rock avalanches, what you see is a few common points. One is that you have a very high velocity. They achieve extremely high velocities. One of the very first ones that was investigated in detail was the Elm Rock Avalanche in Switzerland by a guy called Albert Heim, who was a local geologist. And he came up with a lot of eyewitness accounts. It effectively half wiped out a village, but fortunately there were people standing there who were able to see this thing effectively go past them, and they gave some very useful eyewitness accounts which sort of started off the whole area really of looking at rock avalanche mechanics. One of the things that they appeared to flow in a kind of wave-like motion, and so it wasn't like a standard landslide. You know, rock avalanche is like this high-speed flowing landslide. In fact, he coined the term stream flow to describe these very large rock avalanches. One of the most famous ones occurred in Peru in 1970 during an earthquake. The largest mountain in Peru, a piece of it fell off effectively during the earthquake, and then took about 3.5 minutes for it to travel, I think 16 kilometres, and it wiped out a town of about 18,000 people. And again, there are actually quite a lot of eyewitnesses in this particular case standing on a sort of hillside, able to look over the area. So again, there were some very useful observations made by from those eyewitness accounts. The deposits are very thin. Obviously, if you've got a certain amount of material spreading very, very far, you're going to have that. So that's a kind of a classic thing that you see. But perhaps one of the other most important things is the lack of what we call sorting or mixing of the debris. You actually have the strata preserved from sort of top to bottom. It will end up effectively from this, from a vertical situation to a horizontal situation. It won't roll over itself. It's not turbulent. It's actually effectively a spreading, thinning situation. And what you end up with is even rocks. The strata is very heavily preserved, even if it's pulverized. So you get a completely dust-like material, but it's actually spatially intact. You also get, as I said, a high degree of fragmentation. Generally speaking, you'll get what's called a carapace, or a shell on the surface of intact material, but it will be finely fragmented below. And I think one of the things that's improved in recent years is the fact people have been able to dig down into these rock avalanches and really see how fragmented they are and how fine micron size fines you're getting in there. And they produce clouds of dust. And I'm going to show you the next picture. These two, unfortunately I couldn't show you the video, so I just put the YouTube addresses on there. I couldn't show you those here today, but what we have is the Mount Houghust rock avalanche, which happened early 2013, and just over here is a climbing hut. So there's a bunch of people who are mountaineers standing at the hut videoing this rock avalanche, so it's well worth seeing because it actually shows some really quite extraordinary behaviour, and even their commentary is kind of amusing. So, because they're just it's like, whoa, this is amazing. Watching this thing effectively go right behind, in fact, behind the toilet block, and there's a guy in the toilet, so it's kind of interesting. Anyway, what you see up here is a trace of dust. So this was highly fragmenting. This was, as it was coming down up to about this point, it created this roaring noise that could be heard down the mountain, miles away in the town. They could hear this roar, which they knew something had happened. They were very lucky, these people, obviously, not to be caught up. There are actually other people coming around this side as well who filmed from a different direction. But you see this dust settling at this point, and then you see there's no dust here, where it runs out over the ice and the snow. And what's interesting is the roar stopped pretty much at this point. It's almost silent as it runs out. So it's achieved this high velocity, and then it just gradually glides on the snow. Here's a picture of a completely different scale of event. This is the south of England, the Kent coast line, and what you have is a coastal path running across the top here. People walking along there. Every now and again, a piece of the cliff falls off, and the path moves backwards a little bit. But in fact what happens is you end up with this material running down outwards towards the sea. Now if the material is very weak, what you end up with is a situation where this stuff travels very far outwards. If it's quite a strong kind of chalk material, it actually just basically is a rock fall, so it doesn't break up that much if it's quite strong. But if it's quite weak, and we're talking not a lot of a difference, but a little bit of a difference to make it very weak is enough to make it run out a very long way. Unfortunately, the waves tend to reduce and remove a lot of the evidence, but you can still see some of the rest of the platform that's left behind. So one of the things that we were noticing was the similarity, despite the very big difference in scale, there was actually quite a lot of similarity, again, preservation of strata and so forth between the two. And in fact, it was noticed by a guy called John Hutchinson, who has done a huge amount of work looking at landslide behaviour in the UK. And he noticed that, for example, the chalk collapses occur if you measure the height to the fall ratio, so that's the height of fall to the length of its run out, so that kind of line F that's joining across there. You measure that against the debris volume, you get a reduction in H over L with volume of the landslide. And with a rock avalanche, you get the same effect, except that the scales are quite different, because it's happening at 10 to the 6 cubic metres here and 10 to the 6 cubic metres here. So the scale of a rock avalanche is simply much, much bigger. But the general behaviour is quite similar in terms of the H over L effect. And if you plot L over H, that's the inverse, against avalanche volume here, when we're looking at volcanic, non-volcanic, and even extraterrestrial avalanches, what looks like a certain amount of scatter can be reduced if you plot the aerial spread of the avalanche and how much it spreads out against the potential energy. And so that's been done by Darby and Huppert. They noticed that it was really an energy problem. Also, if instead of plotting H over L or L over H, you plot the normalised runout, basically the spread divided by the cuboid of the volume, you find you get a much more, I think, mechanistically sensible thing to look at. And what you find is that actually does get bigger with avalanche volume. So you're getting rid of the volume effect, but you're seeing that they're, in terms of the thing that you're measuring, but you're still seeing a scale effect. So you are seeing more energetic behaviour at large volumes in terms of extra spread compared to looking at just a sliding block model, for example. Lots of theories have been proposed for this phenomenon over the years. The top three involve extra things, special things, air fluidization, which has been largely discounted, doesn't really work on Mars potentially or the Moon. Frictional melting or gas lubrication, again, very special materials are required to get that. Water fluidization, again, you've got a problem because you're having to suck up material into the main body, and that we know that doesn't happen, at least within the core of the avalanche. It might happen at the base during, say, underground loading, but not in most or all avalanches. The bottom three are more interesting in the sense that they really look at fundamental mechanical behaviour within a very high energy event. The top two really are looking at clast behaviour. The top one is this idea that you've got sound compression waves running through the material. It's rather complex to understand exactly how the mechanism works, but I sort of have a general feeling for it. We're never be able to pin it down. The bottom two are a little bit more straightforward. Self-lubrication through high-speed collisions of clasts, that's all very well, basically vibrational energy, if you like, but where's it coming from? Is one issue. So there's been a number of people talking about this over the years, right from the original Heim suggesting this through to more recent work. And finally, dynamic fragmentation, which I think is a key point that was missed for a very long time because, as I said, the majority of observations were made at the surface of rock avalanches where you had a carapace that you couldn't see just how fragmented the material was below. So there's been some, the original proposers of this concept, Davies and McSabney, have done a lot of work since then, and there's been a lot of work now sort of springing from this idea. So this is what we're sort of focusing on here, but I think it links to the other two concepts. Now this is work that I'm sure you're all familiar with, that if you dynamically fragment a material, as you increase the strain rate or the velocity of impact, you end up with more fragments, and those fragments end up with more energy. So you get more pieces, and you also get damage. So for example, if you don't wholly damage you don't completely fragment something, you might get lots of small cracks. By the same token, those particles have high kinetic energy, so they're flying apart. If you hit them hard, they basically fly apart. So that's an aspect of behaviour which is, I think, very important in dynamic fragmentation in general. So just hold that thought. Kip and Grady have done a lot of work over the last 40 years looking at projectile, ballistic type behaviour, and have developed theory based on the inertial to surface energy sort of relationship, where if you, for example, take an expanding fluid, sort of very theoretical treatment of an expanding fluid, how many pieces will it basically break into? How many fragments will it break into? And it turns out to be an energy balance they develop. And there's a bunch of rather simple relationships, assuming you've got a constant strain rate problem based on a static fracture toughness. So what they use is a static fracture toughness and the strain rate to develop the fact that, for example, during dynamic fragmentation, you get a dynamic failure stress that is a function of the strain rate. They also develop a relationship between the floor size and the minimum strain rate to achieve dynamic fragmentation, and also the particle size that you end up with as a function of the strain rate. So the particle size is not a function anymore of the original floor distribution, because everything's happening so fast, you get multiple nucleation cracks, and so multiple pieces of fragments. And you can see they've fitted, for example, oil shale data to this kind of relationship and found rather a nice, good fit, and they've done this with a number of different geometries and different materials. So what we've done is simply take weak chalk, specifically that we know occurs in long run-out chalk cliff collapses, and a typical value of sort of limestone, typical limestone values that you find in a rock avalanche, and we've simply put in the tensile strength, fracture toughness, density and speed of sound in those materials, the typical values, and to see what comes out. This is a bit of a busy slide, but this is effectively what is in the paper. So this is detail if you want to, but in effect what we've got is you can work out the approximate floor size that should occur according to the static fracture toughness, and it turns out to be very similar between the two materials. They're geologically similar in some ways, so perhaps not surprising, but because the fracture toughness is actually very different, they give a different minimum value for dynamic fragmentation to occur. So in the case of chalk, you're actually achieving, for example, your static failure stress up to this point, then you end up with a dynamic failure stress beyond that, and the same with the limestone, static failure stress, dynamic fragmentation, increasing the failure stress after that with this sort of threshold problem. And so we need to achieve over that threshold in order to actually get dynamic fragmentation. And by putting in those numbers, what we find is that according to the typical size of fragments that you might see in a rock avalanche, and this is really crude, this is like a mean particle size, so obviously there's an awful lot of additional work that needs to be done, but just looking at threshold values, in general for the chalk, you're looking at about 11 metre fall height, which is not very far, and it's very typically most chalk cliffs are over 20 metres, and so perhaps that's a reasonable sort of value for the chalk. Again, a much lower strain rate is needed to be achieved to achieve that dynamic fragmentation. And for the limestone, you need a differential velocity of about 200 metres per second, approximately, depending on the particle size you start with. Now that sounds very high, but if you imagine that the mean velocity we're talking about in these rock avalanches is of the order of 50, 60, 70 metres per second, the differential velocity is not that high. And again, it's a very crude analysis, just getting a general ballpark figure, assuming a constant strain rate and a single event, which of course this isn't. It's much more complex than that. To try and really understand what's going on here, though, that's field data, we're going to have to look at use the geotechnical centrifuge to try and replicate this process at small scale. So a geotechnical centrifuge is in common use in geotechnical engineering because soil behaviour is stress level dependent. So if we make say for example 100 scale smaller model of a problem, it's going to be experiencing 100 times smaller stress. In order to counter that, we can spin it up to achieve 100 Gs in the centrifuge by applying an angular velocity at a particular radius. That gives us our scale number n, and we get that many Gs. And so we basically do this very commonly in order to produce geotechnical models. And we have scaling laws. Typical scaling laws are, in fact, as I said, the length goes down by n, the G level goes up by n, but most importantly, perhaps here, energy goes by n squared, n cubed, pardon me, because the mass goes by n cubed. So we can actually get very high energetic events, relatively speaking, by having a rather small model and putting it in a centrifuge environment. And in fact, centrifuges originally were used by the Soviets to look at ballistics. So it's sort of going back to the original use of the centrifuge in some ways. So these experiments were carried out at the beam centrifuge at the University of Cambridge at the Schofield Centre, and that's one of the original UK centrifuges. 10 metre diameter, can take about 130 G is the maximum G level it can achieve, about a 4 metre working radius. Looking at the picture on the right here, this is effectively a diagram of how the box that we use, that you put a box with your problem in it. On one side you put a counterweight on the other, and you spin everything up, and gradually the box, which is vertical, spins out horizontally to achieve G outwardly from the centre of the spindle on the centrifuge. So you have a camera looking down to look at the runout, and we had a trapdoor filled with geotechnical material, so rock, soil, various things like that, and watched it run out and recorded velocities and fragment sizes and so forth. So here's a picture of the centrifuge after the spin down, and you can see there's sort of fragmented material lying at the bottom there after it's been released from this box, and there's a camera sitting on top here to take videos during flight. Okay, so if I show these two videos, what you can see is the first one is fragmenting. As it hits the bottom, it basically shoots outwards, whereas the one on the right-hand side is gravel, and it simply flows along and gradually dissipates energy. And you see that it really doesn't run out as far as the fragmenting one. So that fragmentation, single-step fragmentation that we achieve, is actually very important to producing the extra runout. So that data, normalised runout here, plotted against what we call relative breakage, effectively how much the material is broken up by, plots very nicely when you also compare it to field data. So this has been very carefully measured by geologists, measuring the size of particles in the deposit. And what we see is that we're not getting a lot of fragmentation, but we seem to be in the same general trend. We did the same thing with chalk, and we found that chalk, again, this is that typical behaviour of L over H or H over L against volume. A few outliers there. And then we did some chalk tests on the centrifuge, producing relative breakage against normalised runout. And if we then plot the whole lot together, our data sits very nicely within the general data produced by field scale chalk cliff collapses. And then on the x-axis here we have the ratio of effectively potential energy to strength of the material. So it seems that ratio is one of the most important things, is that we need to have the energy input, but we also need to be able to exceed the strength of the material in some way. So hence that's why the strength is very important. Coming back to why these centrifuge experiments seem to give us behaviour that's like our field scale problem. If we plot the chalk centrifuge data on the same plot as our field data, what we get is a nominal fragment size of about 25 millimetres, and that's equivalent to a strain rate of about 13 or 14 metres per second. Oh, sorry, 13 or 14 per second, which is about 2 metres per second when it comes to typical velocity, and that's about right. That's the actual impact velocity is probably on the order of about 5 metres per second. So where some of the energy is going into other things, friction and so forth. So it's something, but it's not the right order. Once again, we seem to be getting field-type behaviour using our model. Now, how this actually works in the field, I'm just going to very briefly explain how we actually go from a single-step fragmentation problem into a real field-scale problem. And that's using, in soil mechanics, what we call Guinsaugan's principle of effective stress. And this is the real governing equation for soil mechanics. It says that the shear resistance in the soil is equal to the effective stress times the town friction angle. Fair enough. Normally, we would have total overburden stress, say, minus pore pressure, that is water induced. In this case, we're actually saying that the dynamic pressure associated with fragmentation is actually our pore pressure. So it's a little bit radical and a little bit controversial to say that, but if you imagine you have blocks impacting, there's meant to be a line there, impacting each other, what we find is that if you simply look at the pressure of after a single impact, you get you can see that there's a relationship between the ratio of the size of the particles, the diameter of the particle to its gap, and the velocity and the dynamic pressure. So we get basically a higher pressure for smaller gaps and bigger particles and larger velocities. We can plot that on an interaction diagram of static and dynamic stress against velocity, so that the static stress is, the overburden stress is plotted as horizontal lines, and the dynamic stress is plotted as these diagonal lines depending on d over y, the size of the particle against its gap size. And what you see is in a real rock avalanche, you're looking at the overburden pressures giving you that kind of order of static overburden stress, and in order to exceed that, you need to be looking at a regime where your particle impact velocity is of the order of over 50 meters per second or 40 meters per second, and that your ratio of d to y is of the order of 1,000 or 100. When we look at our experiments, in our grain flow, we're not, our overburden is this green line here, and in our grain type experiments where you only have gravel, we don't exceed that. But in our fragmenting experiments, we do exceed that, and we actually seem to get that dynamic pressure exceeding the static pressure momentarily, allowing us to get additional runout due to the loss of friction between the particles momentarily during runout. Now these data I've just plotted are other experimental data where people have looked at trying to achieve extra runout due to various arrangements. But the problem is, in general, if you plot each of these data, and I'm just generally looking at grain flow data, rock flow data, and even rock crushing on a centrifuge, none of them actually exceeded the overburden pressure that they produced. So I don't think you can actually really get excessive runout unless you, at least momentarily, relieve the overburden frictional resistance that's from the overburden pressure. So it's probably one of the reasons why the experiments on the centrifuge work, but they generally are very difficult to replicate this problem at small scale otherwise. Okay, so it seems that dynamic fragmentation is very important in rock avalanche behaviour, and it's dependent obviously on the field conditions and the rock and the material properties. But what we can see is we get very similar behaviour at large scale in the case of large rock avalanches, small scale in the case of cliff collapses, according to the fact that the strength is scalable as well as the size of the problem. It seems again that dynamic fragmentation and momentum transfer, we need to think about both of them in order to actually understand the propagation of rock avalanches, and we can begin to actually replicate the kind of processes using a centrifuge and using weaker or analog type rock materials that will break under our centrifuge conditions, albeit in very idealized scenarios. It seems that for a long run out, a rock avalanche or a model of rock avalanche needs to produce high large interparticle collisions in order to actually disrupt the overburden stress, or the pseudostatic force chains, as we call them in soil mechanics. And we can do that by producing dynamic fragmentation of the material and the fact that they're actually closely packed to begin with. And it somewhat explains why it is that when a rock avalanche eventually comes to rest, it stops very suddenly. And that can often, I think that can happen largely due to the fact that you've now dilated the whole material and your gaps between the plasts is now also very small. as well as the fact that classes are much smaller, so your D over Y has plummeted due to both of those processes. There's obviously a lot more work to do here to actually nail down more than just thresholds of behaviour. So I just want to thank Andy Taylor and Great, who are at the University of Queens in Canada and the University of Canterbury in New Zealand, who are co-workers on this, and the Royal Academy of Engineering in the UK, who have sponsored this work. Thank you.